You're listening to the Untitled Car Show in partnership with RightFootDown.com. Visit Right Foot Down for your daily automotive fix. If you enjoyed today's program, please tell a friend. It's the best way to support this show. If you want to visit the archives, go to YouTube and search for Untitled Car Show. That'll bring you to the archived episodes. If you want to follow the show, just search for Untitled Car Show on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can always send an email to the show at untitledcarshow@rightfootdown.com. We're so glad you decided to spend the next hour or so with us. Without further ado, let's get into today's program.
All right, welcome again to the Untitled Car Show. My name is Ryan. This week I'm going to do a little bit of a racing themed type gig. Ike thinks that he was there for the Rolex 24 at Daytona based on one of his previous podcasts. He thought he was there for the race, which I have not told him yet, but he was wrong, and he was just there for the roar, but he thought that was really cool that he got to miss it, and he was in Florida at the time. So I figured maybe it would be good to educate the broader listening public about the IMSA series and the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So I've got my friend Dusty from the Slipstream network here with me.
Hey, how's it going, Ryan?
It's not too bad at all. So what do you do over at Slipstream network? Let's let the listener know.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Excellent. So
no.
Good.
No, I do a lot. So I'm the main editor and founder over there at Slipstream Network. You can find us at slipstreamnetwork.com. And so basically, whenever we have a show come through, I also host a couple of them. They all come through me before we send them out into the happy little internet web of things out there. So everything from our IndyCar show like Push to Pass, this North American sports car show like Sports Car America. We've got a new automotive culture show called The Burnouts, which I was editing right before we started recording here. And then we've also got a European sports car show called Final Stint podcast. I edit all those, and we're actually adding more here in 2017. So if I'm not sleeping, eating, or working, I'm editing, which kind of sucks, but it's a love of mine. And I mean, you know it. I mean, you're the motorsport guy over at UTC and Right Foot Down. I mean, there's nothing better than the racing that we're experiencing right now in North America and really even the world. So
it has. I think it's gotten a lot better than it was, especially in its first year post merger. I think those first 2 years were pretty awful, and now I think it's finally somewhere where they can stop trying to fix themselves and they can start trying to grow it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to pan out here in the next couple of years, for sure.
Wait, so you're telling me two series that are somewhat in the same format but completely different philosophy, when they merged them together, there was a little bit of growing pains there? Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, and I think a lot of them were not self-inflicted, but more they came with the territory of trying to mesh together. You know, for those who don't understand, because you're just getting into this or you're just listening to this by accident, I'm talking about the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. It's the premier endurance racing championship in the country. It started off as two separate series. There was one called the American Le Mans Series that the Automobile Club of the West, which is like the French Automobile Association, something like that.
Absolutely.
They kind of managed and gave rules out, and then Don Panos, owner of Panos Cars, he kind of managed the events here. And so that was very much a European-style racing. They had LMP1, LMP2. Audi would come and wreck everybody. And then back in the P2 days, they had the Penske Porsches were pretty good, and they had GT1 and GT2. It was really kind of a cool series. And then there was that other one that all the rednecks liked.
It was like NASCAR road racing, right?
It was. No, it was the Grand American Road Racing Association. Like, I still see people with those coveralls on it. It's like a really long acronym on the back.
That and the trucker hats, the really tall ones.
Yeah, those two. But that was pretty good too. They had what was called the Daytona prototype, which was a tube-framed sports car with what do they have, like 450, 500 horsepower or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very similar in sort of philosophy as like a NASCAR stock car, but this car was made to go around a racetrack.
Right, as opposed to just going in ovals. This was like a road course designed car. And so they weren't shaped like stock cars. They were shaped vaguely like prototypes. One of the unfortunate things about them, though, is because they were adhering to NASCAR rules about the roll cage, the kind of greenhouse that sat up above the car where the driver would sit was huge and ungainly, and nobody liked it because they were ugly. And then when it came down to it, they were only about as fast as the GT classes in the American Le Mans Series was at that time. It made great racing, though. There was always lots of them on the grid. There's some discussion about somebody's entries being subsidized by the series, which I don't want to get into. It did happen, but anyway. Then they had a GT class.
It was a cost-effective alternative, too. I mean, these tube-frame monsters were, I think, a little bit more cost-effective in the life of a chassis. I mean, that ended up changing a little bit when we had to bring them up to the same lap times as the LMP2s when the series merged. But I remember, so I've got a friend in my life. He actually helped, or he was the designer for the Fab Car Daytona prototype, which was the first one.
Oh, cool.
And if you look at some of these sketches before they mandated the huge NASCAR-style roll cage inside, they looked very, very similar to what the cars are looking like today, which is really, really weird to see that come full circle.
Then I'm glad... And you mean cars of today, you mean the Daytona Prototype International, or you think they look similar to the third-gen transition DP?
I guess they did look... They did look similar to the third gen, but if you really left the designers to their own demise, to their own projects, they came up with tube frame cars that looked almost identical to today's Daytona Prototype International. So I was looking at the original Porsche sketch, and it looked very similar to what we're seeing from the Mazda today, and just with a lot more styling, a lot more I guess familiar cues from the car, and not just headlight holes that that represent the car itself. But it's just sort of interesting to see that. I guess the idea was always there. We just had different agendas from different perspectives and different people, and that sort of, I guess, complicated things a little bit. But like you said, you couldn't argue. I know that there's a lot of this. When these two series came together, it was very similar to seeing like Champ Car and the IRL come together, because they were two groups of fans that there was very little. It seemed like there was very little overlap between them. And when they came together, of course, you had the two different philosophies on the track as well, and then those definitely made their lap times in different ways. So it made for some really interesting discussions on the forums and throughout Facebook during that time. But it's just kind of interesting to see that we've sort of finally come together. And you were saying with this new generation of prototype, we're finally like, it's the new series, right? It's no longer the two patched together series. Like, this is its own thing now.
I mean, I hope that's what it's going to be. It looks like it. The end of last year was decent. There was a lot of issues with the balance of performance in GTD. But other than that, I think it has come a long way. And I'm really looking forward to how it's going to continue for sure. But I guess we still technically have to wait and see for when the race comes up this Saturday. Yeah?
Yeah. Actually, it's coming up really quick. This is a great time. But so here we are. We're talking about all these different classes, Ryan, and I know you wanted to kind of give a run through of what we're looking at with multi-class racing, which is kind of complicated for some people. So yeah, and I think one of the big sticking points when both of the series first came together was that those on the Grand Am side were not gung-ho about what was at that time an IMSA with 5 classes. When the ALMS merged. I didn't realize it was that much. It was. The ALMS had LMP1, which was populated at the end by Muscle Milk and Dyson Racing. Muscle Milk had, at that time, an HPD P1 car, and then Dyson Racing still had their isobutanol Mazda. It was a Lola. Don't forget everybody's favorite prototype. Yeah. That was really where I made my introduction to journalism, I think, is I went to the last ever ALMS race at Monterey, and I remember they were having a paddock talk at the Dyson pit, and so all the punters are up there asking, well, how fast does it go? How hard can it brake? How much does it cost? And there's me in the background going, yeah, so you know how you ran that hybrid system a couple rounds ago? Why aren't you running that here?
and you see this like pained expression on the look of the crew chief. And just kind of like toss it aside. It's like, oh, okay. Hey, so that fender extension rear wing thing that the Rebellion team's doing, are you guys do you have a solution for that as well, or is that a Rebellion thing and not a Lola thing? So yeah, that was really my intro to that. I was like, oh, that's fun. Making those people uncomfortable is great.
Yeah, I had a similar experience at, I think it was Chicago a few years ago when the series, after they combined, like I told you off air, I think you've got a little bit more history with all this stuff, but when the series combined and the Mazda prototype was just, the Mazda prototype, I was asking about it, and one of the representatives there was asking about the chassis, and I was still learning quite a bit, so I was a little bit rusty with everything, but I said, I was telling the guy about this Lola chassis or whatever, and he looked at me like he didn't know what I was talking about. So that's when I knew. I was like, okay, maybe rather than just going and looking and watching a lot of these things, maybe I need to start doing some different type of things, and
right.
And that's how we got started with our podcast network. So in a very similar way, and you see that a lot in sports car racing too. I mean, there's a lot of knowledgeable fans out there, and it's quite intimidating actually.
Yeah, and if you get it wrong, there are fans that have lots of avenues, because it's such a small sport, to come and tell you you're wrong very directly.
Have you had any of those stories yet?
I haven't, no. Most of that is because I don't write enough, and a lot of what I say I do under the veil of I'm just a douchebag out here saying what I want to say anyway, so fight me. I don't claim to be doing anything newsworthy, so that's how I get around that, at least. But a lot of my friends, they've posted stuff. My colleagues over at Right Foot Down, one of them recently got to post a couple articles on Jalopnik, and just tore him apart. People just are awful. It's insane. I can't stand it. But
well,
yeah.
And the internet only makes it worse.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, the ALMS, they had 5 classes. They had LMP1, they had LMP2, which was Scott Tucker's personal class. They had Prototype Challenge, which are cars that still run today in the IMSA series. They had GTE, which is GT Le Mans now, in the United States at least. And then they also had GT Challenge, which was just Porsche Cup cars, all racing in the same class. And the whole idea was kind of around 2010, 2011, the ALMS really started to see the writing on the wall that now that all the contracts had expired, the financial breakdown of '08 was finally catching up to them. And so their car counts were going down, and they figured, like, well, we really need to boost car counts or we're not going to meet our promoter minimums, and the TV's not going to want us or anything. And so there was the Prototype Challenge car was not doing super great in Europe. It was a one-make series that was standalone. They just did it the same weekend as endurance races, and they were just sprint races. And then the GTD car, or the GT Challenge cars, which were Porsche Cup cars, there's a gazillion of them all over the place. That's just the nature of how Porsche runs their business. They sell a lot of them. So they just wanted, they were going to get local, the idea was they were going to get local entries in for the GT Challenge, and they ended up having a bunch of full season guys sign up right away. So it was kind of a good way to keep them afloat through the later years. That was part of what Grand Am really wanted to get away from when they first started the merger, was that they thought that too many classes was too complicated. So, and here we are still, we have 4 classes. I do think that after this year, Prototype Challenge is probably going to go away.
Yeah, that's already for sure. That's confirmed.
Yeah, so, which is nice because a lot of the, I didn't think it would happen, but a lot of the Prototype Challenge teams, JDC, Miller Motorsports, Dragon Speed, PR1 Matthias, and they all have moved up to the Prototype DPI field. So that's always been nice. But I think we'll just give like a quick, like a rundown of the classes, and then we'll go into each entry for the classes.
Sure.
All right. So first we've got the Prototype class. And the idea of Prototype, correct me if I'm wrong, this is way spotty history for me. The idea of a sports prototype was, at Le Mans, it was always about production cars. You know, it was Corvettes would come, Mercedes would come, all those cool cars would come, and the idea was you had to have road relevance. It was to test your car and see if it could last 24 hours in France. And of course, like in racing, you start spending more and more and more money. Eventually, it got to where the rules makers went, okay, people are building these one-off road cars. Let's make a class for them. And so the idea is that they were prototype road cars in much the same way that like a concept car would be, that this car theoretically should be good for the road. It has to hold a suitcase. It has to have a spare tire kit with tools in it. It has to be able to accommodate 2 people. It has to run on pump gas, all that kind of stuff. And so through the 80s and 90s, you would have, Porsche 962s, and there was a spot underneath the rear engine cover where you could place a suitcase because there had to be one. So that's kind of where the prototype theme has come from, and it's really not the same anymore. It does require, I think by rule, you still do have to have 2 seats. And I think the toolkit ends up going in the second seat, more or less. But the thing about the suitcase and all that stuff, I don't think they do anymore formally. That's kind of where the prototype name came from. I learned that probably 2 or 3 years ago, asking myself the same question. Like, what does prototype have to do with, what does that mean? That's apparently what it means.
It's kind of an interesting history, too, because if you look until we started to use the term Le Mans prototype, proper, which according to the Wikipedia article is in 1992.
Really? I thought it would have been later than that for LMP 900.
Yeah, well, yeah. There was your LMP 900 and LMP 600, which was, or 900 and 675, and what I think is kind of interesting is, like, up until that point, you look at some of the other classes like Group C and a lot of these other classes, what constituted as a prototype or a GT car, like, I thought was really like gray for quite a while.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, because like the Bentley Speed 8 was a GT car.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, technically, but right. You look at this thing and it's like, or like the Toyota GT1, or even the crazy GT1, homologated specials of the day. And so I think it was, at one point, it was time to say, all right, let's separate these and let those manufacturers who do want to spend as much as they want do that. And for a lot, I mean, I guess it's had its pros and its cons, because we've had some really good prototype years and then we've had some really bad ones. And I mean, even if you look at the top tier of the sport now in LMP1, it's looking like we're probably going to go through another rough time after losing Audi. So I mean, throughout history, prototype has been up, it's been down. We've had several quote unquote golden eras, if you will. Right. So but that is the top level of sports car racing, which we kind of simplified down just into prototype.
Right. There are no hybrids, and as you might hear about WEC and all that stuff. The prototype class in the United States is very much more LMP2 based than it is LMP1 based. It's not strictly the way they've frankly ruined LMP2 at this point. But I think, personally, the current LMP2 and DPI rules really closely mimic what they did in like 2009, before the kind of cost cap era, where it was like Porsche, for example. You could bring a car in the smaller class if you wanted. So there was Porsches, but you could also go out and buy a Lola and all that stuff. And as we see here on the current entry list, Nissan has one, Cadillac has 3, or so Nissan has 2 cars, Cadillac has 3, Mazda has 2. But at the same time, if you want to go out and buy, say, an Oreca or a Ligier LMP2 car, or a Multimatic, I guess Visit Florida has a Multimatic, yeah. You can do that as well. So I think where the United States landed on that was probably better than it could have been, and I think they're going the wrong way in Europe, frankly.
So you're obviously talking about, it was in late 2015 where they announced, we were in a time where there were, how many, was there 6, 7 different LMP2 manufacturers?
Something like that, yeah. Well, there was a lot that would build you a car if you asked them, but weren't currently represented anywhere.
Right, and you saw a lot of variety of cars available, and you saw a lot of variety of engines available, and then, of course, in 2015, the ACO announced that come 2017, there would be a Spec 4 chassis platform with one spec engine, and that would be the global LMP2. for us Americans over here, that wasn't going to work because we don't have LMP1 over here, and we still want to see Cadillacs and Mazdas and Nissans and maybe even Mercedes duke it out in proper terms. And so we decided, okay, that's all fine and dandy. We'll use those 4 chassis, but we're going to allow an automotive manufacturer to put their own bodywork and their own power plant on that car, and that's where you get our Daytona Prototype International variant, which is based on the Global LMP2, which races in with the Global LMP2s in the prototype class. And so, we were talking about BOP back in the old days. There still may be a little bit of that, I guess, between the variety of cars in the prototype class here, but like you said, you can have the little guys. You can have the Starworks Motorsports or the JDC Miller Motorsports. They can go out and purchase their own car from a LMP2 manufacturer and run and actually have a really good chance of potentially winning the Rolex 24 overall against manufacturers.
Right. And I think even more so. So if you're, Tequila Patron notwithstanding, if you're, let's look through here, Rebellion Racing, PR1 Matthias, and if you have a wealthy customer who comes in and says, hey, I'd really like to run Le Mans this year. I know we've been doing really good, but I'm going to put in my entry and I really want to run Le Mans this year. Can you do it? It doesn't necessitate buying an entire new car. You can just use the one your team already has, which I think was a nice consideration they made when they decided that the DPI spec manufacturer cars would be balanced to stay within the LMP2 range rather than the other way around, which I think was nice.
Right. I think there are some issues, long-term issues that are going to have to be solved, and I do think we're going to see a change in that eventually, but in their current spec with a manufacturer body and a manufacturer specific engine, they cannot run at Le Mans, which, I mean, that's another. It's funny, a lot of the newcomers coming to this, and it's funny because, I am as well, and in a sense, a lot of them may not be picking up on some of the sort of deep differences in philosophy still between a couple of different teams in the IMSA WeatherTech Championship.
Right.
But some do want to go over there and run at Le Mans, some don't, and this does offer some of that freedom, which I guess is still, I mean, like I said, I still think there's a lot of room for change in the future as well, because they would have to still go through somewhat of a pretty large change between DPI spec and LMP2 spec, but at least the option's there, which is a good thing.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of times you get too many options, but I think, and obviously I also think it's going to change in the future, but I think where they're at now, if they could just keep it here, and if the cars are in fact balanced, then this is where I think they should be, and if they can keep this going, I think they'll have a healthy entry, especially as the cars, you start to amortize the cost over time, and you can enter 2 cars, you can enter 3 cars, however many you want. So
that's not to mention the fact that, sure, we do have some guys that can go over there and run at Le Mans. That's all great and dandy. But what it does is it makes your premier events like the Rolex 24 have 12 prototype entries, because you've got Rebellion, you've got Dragon Speed coming over from other series to race here, because they can race their car without any modification whatsoever. So that's always good.
So let's see. Moving on down, let's go ahead and look at the prototype challenge class. This will be easy. The prototype challenge car is what year did they finally settle on calling it? Like 2002 or 3 LMP1 car body?
Oh, I'm not really sure.
Courage.
That design went through a number of different manufacturers as well.
Right, but the original one, there was a company called Courage. They built the LC, it was the C50 or 60, which was like an LMP1 car, and then they got bought out by Oreca, who build sports cars now. And so Oreca got all of the kind of IP that Courage had, and then they started selling designs. And so, like, Honda, for example, used a heavily modified Oreca on their P2 cars, their initial ones, the Acuras. Mm-hmm. This body popped up. It's also part of the old Oreca P2 car was based on the Courage. And so it was a pretty good frame, and the idea was that if you keep using this chassis, you don't have to crash test it every time. So it saves a lot of money, and it was already decent. They already knew it passed the crash test. So you could hang whatever body panels you wanted off of it, You change the engine and all that stuff, and you would have to change a lot to get to where they'd have to re-crash test it. So they used this body for a long time. One of the things they did with it was they used a very plain, very simple version of it called the FLM 09, or the Formula Le Mans 09. And so in 2008 and 2009, they announced one make series. They're going to be open top, what used to be a prototype 1 or prototype 2 car. Instead, we're going to shoehorn in it's like a 6-liter Chevrolet V8. Something like that. I think it's 6 liters, right?
Yeah, it's an LS engine, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it is an LS engine.
Yeah, it's an LS 6.2 liter.
And they're built by, I think it's K-Tech builds them. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. Yep.
But the idea was, you would buy, like they used carbon ceramic brakes, which you would think, oh, it's more expensive than regular brakes, but a set of carbon ceramic brakes would last an entire season. Not counting the endurance races, you'd have to change them out. But if you just have a season of 2 to 4 hour races, you could use one set of brakes, just changing pads the whole season. So that saved cost. The gearbox was off the shelf, very, comparatively speaking, inexpensive to acquire. There would be an Orica truck at every race, so you could go and buy spares from them. There was lots of body work, lots of stuff. Shocks were off the shelf. Everything was off the shelf. And the idea was, if you wanted to get into this, here's a car that's solid, that's mostly safe, other than the fact that it's open top, which, like, for example, Patrick Dempsey didn't do Prototype Challenge because he wanted a closed top car, because his insurance wouldn't let him, I believe, drive an open top car.
Hey,
so
man, that face isn't cheap to insure.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, and when you're the lead character on one of North America's premier TV shows, you can't just go do whatever you want. But I guess one of his co-workers at that time rode bulls professionally, which I thought was more dangerous than driving an open-top P2 car, but,
You'd think.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so it's a class of all the same car. They buy them, stick stickers on them, send them out on the track. Fun car to drive. They recently made a couple additions. They added, excuse me. They added a very basic traction control system to make them a little bit easier to drive, because people were complaining that P2 cars were easier to drive than these were, because they're kind of big, brutish, old-fashioned race cars, so they don't have a lot of technology in them that, like the stability controls and stuff that make the P2 car such a breeze to drive now. So there's...
Well, let's not forget, it's from, you said the design goes clear back to 2002.
Something like that.
That's unheard of in sports car racing. I don't remember how long each generation of the Daytona prototype lasted, but you had 3 generations between 2003 and it would be 2016. So
right.
To see a car race for that long was really kind of interesting. And as we are going into the final season, it makes sense, though, why this was the quote-unquote budget class. It was the Pro-Am class. You could be a team owner. You could try to get a paying driver to pay, let's say, half the season cost, and you'd still be working on a car that, there were enough spares out there, it was easy enough to work on, that it would be very budget conscious, I guess you could say. So, it definitely served its purpose. Very, very similar to what, the Daytona prototype did after many years of being criticized by a lot of, I guess, more European-centric sports car fans, but they definitely both had their applications, and they've been used pretty well.
Yeah. And I think the telling part is the 09, insofar as NASCAR, I think, has had 2 changes in that time. But they've been able to use the same chassis and the same body work. They did have an engine computer change at some point, like 2010 or 11, where they changed ECUs or something. But other than that, they've kept these cars going for like 7 years. So if you're a team owner and you bought a car, unless the chassis gets written off, which in this class happens semi-frequently, unless the chassis gets written off, you have a long time to recoup your costs on that. And they weren't that expensive comparatively to start with.
Yeah, and it has, this car too was, being in design somewhat similar to, I guess a lot of open wheel race cars as well. It allowed a lot of drivers to actually make that transition from, let's say, IndyCar, Formula One to sports car racing when it was their time. So that the car not only helped a lot of teams in a lot of different ways in terms of cost, but it definitely helped sustain motorsports careers over, quite a long lifespan as well. Unfortunately, here we are in 2017, it being the last year. I believe when the Roar entry list, the test list entry list first came out, there were only 2 entries to begin with, and now we're up to 5. So, I mean, it is a car that is probably seen its better years, but we've still got a few teams here that are going to choose to run it this year.
I personally look forward to seeing these hopefully pop up in club racing. I think they're going to make great club racing cars. They're simple enough that you could work on them yourself. In terms of rules and regulations, you wouldn't have to look too closely at the engine to see if it's been messed with or not. In either case, you could use a restrictor anyway. I think I'm really looking forward to seeing those pop up on the used market. I hope they do, at least. And I think Oreca is smart enough to see that if people are starting to use them for club racing, they'll continue to build parts. I don't know that for sure, but that's my hope. And if I were them, that's how I would end up doing it. Like if you're Star Wars, you could run that for somebody at SCCA runoffs. You could run it at NASA. You could run it at the 25 Hours of Thunder Hill. You could run that car in SCCA P1, or I think in NASA they call it Sports Unlimited. You could run that car pretty well, yeah.
Does that mean that we could possibly see? Can you talk to your bosses over there and see if we can get a right foot down Slipstream Network Pro-Am entry into some of these vintage sports car events?
I would love to do that. Unfortunately, I'm told that we don't have enough money for that. I do know over at Team Clearcoat, they are part of a Chump Car team. So I'm kind of covertly hoping that because they live in Colorado and I'm out here in California, I'm kind of hoping they'll come over and do some events over here at some of our great tracks. And I can pay my way into one of their seats and then come back to Right Foot Down and be like, dude, we need to do this. This is sweet. Let's do it.
Hey man, it's content.
Yeah, it is content. Well, Ike has he has his Volvo that he's working on that he wants to make into a racing car.
Swedish cars are gross.
Yeah, he's got a Nissan V6 he's trying to put into it. So
That's awesome.
I don't know where he's at with that because he kind of wishy-washes about it and changes his mind, but I'm hoping he gets that going too, and we'll see that as well. But yeah, I'd love a seat. And by the way, if you are listening, I would love to do a feature story about how to drive a Porsche Cup car. So if you're a team or somebody who owns a Porsche Cup car and you'd like to let a rank amateur come drive your car, I'm here. So hit me up.
No
please.
comment. No comment from over here.
All right. So let's see. We got GTLM. Used to be my favorite class. Now to me, it's kind of meh. And I kind of struggled with why for a while. And I think I've finally figured out why I'm not so big of a fan. So do you want to explain what GTLM is?
Okay, yeah. So we just moved from the prototype classes, your top tier prototype, and then your second level Pro-Am prototype challenge. Now we're moving into the GT classes. This is the first of the two. It is the Pro class. So a manufacturer can show up and be completely pro, which is we can do a whole nother show on that later, Ryan. But
yeah.
You could put any drivers you want in these cars, and this is supposed to be the class where the manufacturers can show up and quote unquote run what they brung, and you can see the likes of Ford, Chevrolet, Ferrari, Porsche, BMW duking it out on America's greatest circuits with the greatest sports cars in the world to ultimately claim the championship. These cars differ not just a little bit, but they are completely different chassis from the GT Daytona field, which we'll talk about in a little bit. GTLM is the same spec as GTE over in the World Endurance Championship and in the European Le Mans Series. It is left over from GT2. So back in the GT1, GT2 days, GT2 morphed into GT3. So we've got a little bit of history there, but I don't know why it stopped being your favorite class, Ryan. There are plenty of issues for fans to complain about in this series or in this class right now.
So You mentioned that it was a run what you brung, and I think that's part of why I've become disenchanted with it. Because it's
I had
not,
air quotes. I know it's a podcast, so nobody could see that, but they were massive air quotes.
It's not a run what you brung class, and that's really what drives me insane. It'd be like Mercedes showing up to an F1 race and being like, hey, so listen, I know the rules say that we're supposed to use V6 hybrids, but we don't have a V6 hybrid in our lineup, and actually... we have this 7.2 liter V12 that we used to put in our cars. We don't put it in there anymore, obviously, because if you know which manufacturer I'm referring to at this point, good on you. But we don't really put the V12 in any of our cars that are similar to this, or we don't put the V6 in any of our cars, and we want to use the V12 that we use in another car instead. So can you just let us use our 7 liter V12? In the class instead of what the rules say, and that'd be Charlie Whiting. It'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can use the V12. I know there's rules, but we really can't afford to lose you. We love having your money. Please bring a V12. And then Ferrari's over there going, what? Wait, what?
Or
you
can have a manufacturer that is building the world's greatest supercar. It's going to be super, super expensive, but they're building it. Don't worry. We promise it'll be available very soon. It's not available yet. We know it's a production-based sports car class. It's not available now. Just let us race a full year before this is available to the public, and even then, we're just going to sell just the very minimum amount because this is a supercar. This is very, very special and important, only for the highest of the high in class and society. But we don't have it right now. Can we kind of just jump in right now?
It drives me crazy. I can't stand it. So I found while we've been talking the ACO document about what an LMGTE car, or as we call it in America, GT Le Mans car. Let's see. Unless explicitly authorized by present regulations, the use of the following materials is prohibited unless it corresponds exactly to the material of the original part: titanium, magnesium, ceramics, composite or fiber reinforced materials, except housings, covers, mounting brackets, and accessories. Let's see. And then material. So the whole point was you have a road car. You're allowed to make it X wider. You're allowed to add X amount of wing to it. You can do... You still there?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. Anyway, you can add X amount of wing. You can... take certain things off the dashboard, but it does still have to remain mostly similar. You can do all of these things, but the car still has to be like the road car. It still has to look the same.
So does that mean you can take the engine and move it from one side of the axle to the other?
As it turns out, no. You can't do that according to LMGTE rules, and it also means that you can't take your two-seater convertible, give it a hard top, and then go, oh, well, I mean, it doesn't come with a V8, but, we need one. So we're just going to put one in, which is what BMW did with the Z4, which was its own. And even then, the Z4, apparently you can stretch the wheelbase by, 5 inches if you want. That's totally fine. You can totally change the wheelbase, too. And you can change the wheelbase a little bit. It's mostly width. But I think you can lengthen it very, very... very small amount. Let's see. And so minimum weight, checking conditions, blah, 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 designation, dimensions. And so there's a lot of rules. It's much like an F1 rulebook or an LMP1 rulebook where the original car must be this, but you can add these things. You can add a flat bottom if you want. We're okay with that. That's fine. But you can't have active aerodynamics, stuff like that. So it's about building and developing a car. And now it's been, especially in IMSA, perverted to the point where they so can't afford to lose anyone that they have started just kind of letting people do whatever they want and then balance of performancing everybody back together, which I think defeats the purpose of GTE.
Yeah, I mean, and there are a lot of issues with that too. The past year, we've seen more BOP changes in this class across the world than we've seen anywhere else. In fact, if you were paying attention, I know this is an IMSA, but if you were paying attention to the WEC last year, they would change the BOP. I think it was almost after every race, and every results table looked like a Formula One race because it was Aston, Ford, Ferrari, and that's not really something anybody wants to see, and that's really not what the class is supposed to be about.
Yeah, I remember it was probably 4 years ago, when the Ferrari 458 first came out. The way they had their fuel tanks plumbed was such that you could put fuel into the car really quickly. And it was a clever engineering design. It came on the regular road car. And so they could fuel up a lot faster than everybody else could. And I want to say it was Corvette. Might have been Porsche. I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot of manufacturers around. Oh, I guess BMW was around then, too. Everybody immediately complained and said that it, quote, wasn't fair. And so they started putting car-specific fuel flow restrictors onto the fueling rigs. But to me, it's like, yeah, the C6 doesn't have that cool thing, so maybe you should add that, and then when the C7 comes out, you'll have that too. Maybe the BMW M3 doesn't have that, so when you cheat and bring the Z4 over from the GT3 class, you can include that. But just all kinds of asinine stuff they've done, in the last 5 or so years that have really dumbed down the class. And I understand that you got to keep the promoter minimum, you got to keep the class relevant, you got to do all that stuff. But what's the point of having a rule book if you're not going to use the rule book?
There's also debate on, I guess this was on a Radio Le Mans program not too long ago, whether or not there actually is technically a GTE Pro / GTLM rulebook at all, and whether or not it's just some semi-existent document floating between a bunch of different people. So it's kind of all up for debate. And look, there's plenty of things to be dissatisfied about, but at the same time, you're not going to find a GT class anywhere else where you're seeing the full manufacturer efforts behind GM, BMW, Ford, Ferrari, and Porsche. So this is what we have. This is the top tier in the GT class. So there is merits for sure. If you're a big manufacturer guy, if you're a big Ford guy, and that's who you root for, this is the class you're going to be paying attention to.
Right. They do have some really cool cars. For a long time, I was a big BMW fan. I managed to track down. Have you ever tried to find BMW apparel from the race team? Impossible.
I have not.
They don't have it on thetheir website. It's nowhere. And I found a hat at a random shop once, and I was like, "Oh, I'll have that." It was BMW Team RLL hat I had for a while. But lots of cool cars. Ford GT, Porsche 911 with the engine in the wrong spot, Corvette C7, BMW M6, which, as I understand, is not really a GTE car either. It's a GT3 car that they've... What's the point of the GTD class, then? Why?
Well, okay,
who cares? Then why would you even bother?
Technically speaking, I think the Ferrari is too. I'm pretty sure you can upgrade your Ferrari GT3 car to a GTE car.
Now, there is a difference. I asked about this, and this was a thing that I said for a long time, and I posted it on all kinds of forums, and people like John Hindon, Graham Goodwin, told me I was a fool.
You fool!
GT3, you kind of build a race car however you want that vaguely resembles the road car. You can change wheel lengths, you can make big fenders, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever the hell you want. As long as it's the same engine company, you're fine. And then they balance them all together at the beginning of the year, and you're good to go. I've been saying for a long time, if it's truly rung what you brung in GT3, why not just build one car, build a GTE car to GTE rules, and then homologate that as your GT3 car? And I think Ferrari finally did that.
Well, there's always the, it's just about as tried and true as the mid-engine Corvette. There's always talks about a potential GTE GT3 merger, but we still have yet to see it.
Yeah, it makes me very grumpy to see it, because like the Ford GT, would it be competitive in GT3? Probably. I would imagine so, and if it wasn't competitive, they'd BOP it up to where it was, or they'd BOP everything else back. It defeats the purpose of the class if you're going to start doing it that way. So I hope that in the next 2 or 3 years, they either combine the classes or go back to saying, okay, but we actually follow rules now. This is actually how we're going to do this from now on. So you can't just get a free pass. So, yeah.
Right. Well, that's the pro class. So what's the final class here?
So the final class is GTD, which in the United States is the GT3 class. The GTD is based on the back in the Grand Am days, they had a GT class that was really strange. You could have like a tube frame car with a production body over it and the production engine. Or I remember the Porsche was like, it was a GT3 car, but you could have the GT2 gearbox and you had to change rear wing. It was just this really convoluted mishmash of like, you were supposed to be able to develop the car, but they wanted to start with a lower spec than GT2 because GT2 is very expensive. Eventually,
very
they came
much its own thing too. I mean,
it was.
You didn't see these cars anywhere else.
Yeah, or like the Mazda RX-8 GT car was excellent.
There was for sure. There were some very, very cool cars in here. Some great teams as well. Now it got really funky when we decided to bring the two series together. American Le Mans Series and Grand Am, and that caused a lot of issues for a lot of different teams and manufacturers.
Yeah. So fortunately, they switched, and even towards the end of Grand Am, they started going towards, okay, well, let's just use the GT3 class instead. And so the GT3 car is meant to be like Lamborghini builds one, Lexus builds one. That's very much not in, like, whereas GTLM is more, I think, marketing for your particular brand. Whereas I think GT3 is more of a money-making venture for the manufacturers, if that makes sense.
Right. Yep.
So Audi builds a gazillion R8 LMSs. Lamborghini builds a bunch of Lamborghini Huracans. Lexus has built probably 3 RCFs, and because they're running them in-house, which drives me insane anyways. Like, if you want to run it in-house and you want to be a factory, run in GTLM. And as we've proven, you can walk into the IMSA office and be like, hey, by the way, I have a cool car. It just doesn't really, like that rule book thing. Yeah, we didn't really bother. Can we come in? And they go, sure. So I don't know why Lexus, Mercedes, somewhere on here, I was reading the entry list earlier. It's a Porsche 911 in the GTD class with Patrick Lindsay, George Birdmeister, and Matthew McMurray. Like, that's a factory car. Those are factory drivers. Why are you... No. Don't...
Right. Well, and that's the thing about this class, right, is it's... So with the 4-class format, they've got 2 pro classes, 2 pro-am classes, and 2 prototypes, 2 GT classes. So regardless of what you want to run and what kind of budget you have, you should be able to find a place here. This is supposed to be the privateer class. This is supposed to be for Park Place Motorsports to, go out and buy a GT3 Porsche. And then along with, you did mention a couple of these drivers, maybe along with the purchase of that car, they get a driver for a year from Porsche factory. And so that's where the Jörg Bergmeister comes in from. But unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I mean, we've got some really amazing cars here, but what you will have doing is you'll have manufacturers show up like Acura, take one of the best teams in history, one of the fan favorite teams throughout sports car racing, and have them run their Acura program and then get a ton of very, very, very skilled drivers and taking every bit of advantage of this driver ranking system that we're using, this very flawed system that we're using. Mm-hmm. And what you'll have is you'll have the likes of Andy Lally and Catherine Legge in a car together. You'll have Ryan Hunter-Reay and Tom Dreyer and Jeff Segal and Oz Negri Jr. in the car with them. Graham Rahal sitting in the car with Lally and Legge at Daytona. So you've got teams like this powerhouse team, which they're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with what Michael Shank Racing is doing. They're just trying to take advantage of the rules the best they can.
Right.
But what should be a privateer class, you actually have manufacturers coming in and really starting to change the landscape. And we're already seeing fallout from that as well. I mean, some teams are starting to look elsewhere for racing.
Yeah, I'm flipping through here, and I think we'll probably start at GTD when we do the class rundown, since we're already down here. You've got all these people it's the mix and match in the GTE and the GTD, or the GTLM and the GTD class, that kind of really makes me grumpy. And I know it's allowed in the rules and stuff, but I think they need to sort of tighten it up a little bit so that you don't have that as being a thing. Because what you're going to do is you're going to piss off Mike Hedlund. You're going to piss off, let's see, who? I'm looking at these cars, I'm like, oh, who's the amateur in that car? No one knows. You're going to make just Kenny Habul, who I don't even think supports the series usually. I might be wrong on that. Maybe he's new. But all these people who put up money, Colin Braun. No, Colin Braun's a pro. Who am I thinking of? Cooper McNeil. There we go. Mm-hmm. Cooper McNeil. You don't want to piss him off. He'll leave. His dad will leave. But, I'm making a joke there, but it's, if you allow a car like the number 98, which is Paul Dall'Anna, Pedro Lamy, and Matthias Lauda, who were the three, I guess Paul Dall'Anna is kind of an AM.
He's a silver, but he's a very strong silver.
Yeah, he's a strong silver. And then Marco Sorensen, Pedro Lamy, and Matthias Lauda, they ran the GTE car for Aston Martin in the WEC.
Well, Paul Dall'Anna, he just won the the GTE AM championship last year.
Yeah, it's not tenable to keep doing it like this. That's my opinion, at least. You've got to make a change at some point. And like, this is going to be kind of a weird one because you have really big driver squads for the 24, which I'm okay with. But it's like, wow, I don't know.
I know I've already picked on Acura a little bit, but let's just take the number 93, for instance. You've got Andy Lally, who's got 9 Rolex watches already. Mm-hmm. Catherine Legg, who has not only driven in Champ Car, but she's been in the prototype, and they were leading at Daytona last year until they unfortunately had a crash. And IndyCar driver Graham Rahal. Those are your 3 strong drivers there. You've also got Mark Wilkins, who's got a long sports car history as well. But that is a Pro-Am class that is competing with, like you mentioned, guys like, Sun One Energy, Kenny Abul, who's just coming in and wanting to have a good time. He's got a couple of great drivers on his squad as well. But I mean, right. This is a completely stacked lineup, and it just, it makes for some, I guess, points of contention, if you will.
Yeah, I will say that it does cause contention.
And I will.
So I'm going to start at the bottom here. We've got the number 991 GT Daytona. It's a Porsche 911 GT3R, so it's the Porsche GT3 car. All of Porsche's cars are called GT3, though. All of them. I don't know why, but that's what they've stuck with, I suppose. Anyway, we've got the GT Daytona, number 991, Santiago Creel of Mexico. I believe he is an amateur driver. We've got Mike Hedlund of the United States, who lives up near Sonoma. He runs with Flying Lizard quite frequently through 4 events around the thing. Is he with K-Pax next year? Well, K-Pax is Flying Lizard now, right?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, technically, K-Pax is the McLaren arm, and Flying Lizard is the Porsche arm of practically the same team. But they did just announce today, as of the recording, that Mike Hedlund will be one of the full-time drivers in their McLaren GT cars in Pirelli World Challenge.
Excellent. He's a very good amateur driver. And unlike some other tech industry amateurs, he has good opinions on the internet as well. So we've got Wolf Hensler, who is the professional hired gun of Porsche. I don't think he's ever been on a factory team since I've been watching.
No, he was with Falcon for a while. Where was he before that? He did some Flying Lizard stuff, didn't he?
Yeah, he did Flying Lizard. Well, I guess Flying Lizard was the factory car for a while, so well, whatever. I like my version better anyway. So anyway, Wolf Hensler, no stranger to finding teams and helping them out, carrying their car to the front. He's getting quite old now as well. I want to say he's over 40, maybe even 43-ish.
He's 41.
41. Okay, well, there you go. We've got Jan Halen, who is a pro driver. I'm sure he's a gold. And if he's not a gold, he's a really good silver.
Yeah, I don't know what he's been up to the past couple of years, but he also spent some time in the Champ Car World Series.
Yeah. Oh, well then, yeah, he's probably definitely a gold then. And then we have everybody's favorite, Uncle Tim Pappas. So, and he used to have his own team called Black Swan, which I remember famously he wanted to run LMP2, and then within, I don't know, the first 30 seconds of the first race he ever did with that car, he wrote it off. I believe it was at Long Beach that he did that. It was a Lola car, and something with, like, he had to start at the back, and a GTD car hit him, and he just nailed a wall, and he was just so irate about the whole thing, and then he didn't come back and race for a while. It was pretty... The interview was amusing, but I can imagine that if your $750,000 investment just gets written off within 30 seconds of you starting a race, you'd be pretty annoyed as well. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Tim's a cool guy though. He's pretty rad.
Yeah, well, that's good. We like rad people here.
We like rad people.
So we've got the number 98 factory Aston Martin Racing Aston Martin Vantage. I believe this would be the V12 car because it's in the GT3 class. We've got Paul Dalla who pretty much, I don't know why he's rich, but every season he decides, like, oh, I'm going to buy this entire team. I'm going to pay all of them, and I'm going to go win a bunch of races. And he does. He does it every year. It's crazy. I think he used to run with Turner in the GTD, or in the Grand Am days.
Yep.
And then he's recently, well, not recently, it's been a couple of years. I think he switched to Aston Martin right before the merger or during the merger. And he's been running the World Endurance Championship, doing a hell of a job over there. Aston Martin are great at running amateur cars.
Yeah, I've never seen him not smile, but he seems to be the kind of guy that you don't want to piss off because he's a giant.
Yeah, he's quite large. And so I believe Pedro Lamy is also quite tall, so that works out.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, Paul's a very strong amateur driver, so I don't remember what the lineup was in GT AM last year in the European Series, but very successful lineup there. So I'm not sure. Is that going to be a full season? Do we know?
I don't think we know. I doubt it will be. I'm sure he'll be an NAEC entrant. I'm sure he'll do all the endurance rounds with maybe one or two sprinkled in here or there when there's an open thing. But I believe he has another entry for the World Endurance Championship. So kind of has no reason to race here when he can go to Dubai. And they don't go to Dubai, but wherever the hell it is they go that's fancier than Wisconsin.
Right.
So they've got Paul Dalla Pedro Lamy of, I believe he did touring cars as well as drove for Peugeot's 908 team, diesel LMP1 team back in the mid to late 2000s. I think.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
I'm pretty sure he was on the team at least 1 year. Matthias Lauda, I believe that's son of Niki Lauda. Son of, grandson of?
Son of. Yeah, return of Nicky.
Yeah. And then we've got Marco Sorensen, who is a professional driver on the Dane train, as they call it at Aston Martin. Very, very good driver. Let's see. So we've got Turner Motorsports, which is the BMW M6 GT3 team. They've got Justin Marks, who is news to me. We've got Jens Klingmann and Maxime Martin, who are both DTM drivers, I believe. And Jesse Krohn, who I also know nothing about.
This was the team last year. Kind of an interesting end of the season at Petit Le Mans. I believe the two Turner cars, didn't they make contact like right at the end? And
I think so.
I thought Jens Klingmann got really pissed off and like basically just ditched the team. I guess they must have patched some things up, but I honestly, I was at that race and I was like, I've got to find out what happened. And I went down to the paddock area and I could not find him. So I didn't really know what had happened there, but it looks like they're back again for 2017. So that's a good thing.
I feel it might not have been Jens's choice to go back because Turner Motorsport are pretty factory associated team, and so I feel like they probably have paid to have two factory drivers in their car, and seeing as the GTLM entries both have 4 drivers each, there probably wasn't a whole lot left in the BMW roster to send them, so that might have just been the choice they've had. And Maxime Martin, who's just an excellent driver from what I've seen.
So then we move on to the two Acura teams, 86 and 93. The 86, it's Jeff Segal, Oz Negri Jr., Tom Dyer, and Ryan Hunter-Ray. And then, of course, we've got the Love Boat, number 93, Andy Lally, Catherine Legg, Mark Wilkins, and Graham Rahal. I've already complained enough about this driver lineup, but any thoughts on that one?
Is this Sergeant Tom Dyer, who used to run the Mazda team? Who is the veteran? Am I thinking of the right person or no?
I believe you are. I'm going to have to look that one up.
Anyway, that's a cool story if that is him. He raced in Continental Tire in a Mazda for a really long time. I remember he won a race at Lime Rock. And it was a big enough news story that it got onto like Sports Center. There was like Iraq and Afghanistan veteran comes back and wins race. And then the only footage they had, because nobody was at the Continental Tire race, was someone's garbage cell phone footage of the podium ceremony. That was all they had. And I was like, are you kidding me? There was no media there. You're like, 3 hours from New York? You couldn't have sent one guy. Just one guy to cover the race. Because you know he's there. It's always a possibility that he's going to win. If you're that close, just send somebody. But,
I believe you also saw Tom in an Elan MP01 there at the 25 hours.
We did. Did a good job. That team, unfortunately, they raced on their own in that class, but they did a very good job. That car ran like clockwork. All right, so we've got the number 75. It's the first Mercedes AMG GT3, which is kind of the coupe that came in. I'm sorry?
Beautiful race car.
Beautiful race car. I
love the AMG.
I saw the WeatherTech car in person at the LA Auto Show, and I agree. I think that looks a lot better than the Gullwing SLS did. I like this one a lot more than I like the SLS.
Right, and we've got a couple of, so this is Kenny Habul's team, the Sun Energy One racing team. He's actually got some NASCAR Xfinity series, and then of course we've got longtime series stalwarts Boris Said, Tristan Vautier. Now I believe those three, and I don't know about Mauro Engel, but those three did race in the third Flying Lizard Motorsports Audi in last year's Rolex 24, and now they're going to be competing in the series together this year.
Gotcha. I believe Mauro Engel is a Mercedes factory driver. So he may not have been there last year when they were in the Audi, which probably had an Audi driver with it.
Right. Actually, you know what? I think it was Dion von Moltke, so it was.
Well, there you go.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've got I think they stand a decent chance at doing well. The Mercedes teams always show well, like in Europe at least. They always show pretty well, and we've got Boris Said, who's been in the game longer than a lot of us have been alive. Mauro Engel's proven himself time and time again in endurance racing. And Tristan Vautier, who's an excellent young driver. I don't know about Kenny Habul, though. Is he good? Is he meh? Is he a bronze? Is he a silver?
I don't know what his ranking is, but he is a proper AM, but I believe last year they had a couple issues with that car mechanically, but I think all of his driving was done pretty clean. So as long as he can keep the car in one piece, I think Boris, Tristan, and Mauro are definitely going to be able to bring that car home in a very good position.
All right. So after that, we've got the number 73 of Patrick Lindsay, Georg Bergmeister, and Matthew McMurray, along with the TBD, who is also making an appearance in the number 75. For the Park Place Motorsports Porsche 911 GT3. I think that car stands as good a chance as any to do well in the race because it's a Porsche and it has Jörg Bergmeister behind the wheel.
It does, and I'm really glad to see these guys back because I think this team was sort of they weren't sure if they were going to show up this year. The speculation right now is that they are here just for the Rolex 24, I believe. So hopefully we can see some more races with this team. Maybe they'll show up for a North American Endurance Cup. But, this is, once again, we were talking about the privateer teams, the true guys who are showing up, buying a car. And, I mean, there are some strong drivers here. You've got Bergmeister and McMurray, but, Patrick Lindsay is the absolute, he is the definition of a Pro-Am driver. So those are the guys we really want to keep seeing here. And I, for one, am very glad to see them show up.
And this is really the tone of an entry that I would want to see repeatedly. We've got Matthew McMurray, who's a very good young driver. We've got Jörg Burgmeister, who's one of Porsche's finest, and we've got Patrick Lindsay riding the checks. That's what a GTD team should look like.
Yep.
But I'm not in charge, so there you go.
And our next entry is the number 63 Scuderia Corsa Ferrari 488 GT3. Reigning champions Christina Nielsen and Alessandro Balzan. Those guys are really fun to watch. Two really fun people that got a great sense of humor. Definitely going to be strong this year as well. And then Matteo Crisoni and Sam Bird as well. And I don't know much about Crisoni, but Sam Bird, obviously, longtime driver, going to be very strong with this entry here.
Yeah, I see Sam Bird definitely getting a factory squad nod shortly. There's no way people can keep him off of their books. Like, he is way too fast and way too good. He was in did he win GP2, or did he come like a really close second or third?
That I cannot tell you.
He was in GP2, I want to say, for 2 or 3 seasons, and he was at the front constantly amongst people who are either in F1 right now or in prototype racing right now, making a lot of money.
It looks like he's got an overall third place finish in GP2. That was 2013. Okay.
So he's a very good driver, pops up lots of places. Scuderia Corsa, always going to be a strong one to watch. Was it Scuderia? No, that was the other. What was the other Ferrari team that came over from the GTD side that was, I'm totally blanking on their names. They're in the race. Who am I thinking of? Bill Sweedler and Townsend Bell. Did they drive for Scuderia Corsa, or was that a different team?
I think that was AF Corsa.
AF Corsa.
Or was it Risi? It could have been Risi. I don't really remember.
Well, there was a fourth one. It was the FXDD. Was that Risi?
Yeah, it could have been Risi.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Scuderia Corsa always gets a decent showing. 488 GT3 is a good car. We've got Christian Engelhardt, Rolf Einchen, don't care, Roberto Pampini, Christopher Linz, and Milos Pavlovic. Pavlovic or Pavlovich?
All you have to do is say it with a certain amount of confidence, and we'll
then
all
it happens. So this is one of the Petermina cars, Lamborghini Huracan GT3. I believe Petermina is a Eastern oil company, something like that.
I know GRT. They've been around for quite a while. I cannot tell you if it's a British GT or Blancpain that they're going to be racing in next year as well. I think they've also got a Lamborghini Super Trofeo plan as well now.
Gotcha. I believe Christian Engelhardt is the Lamborghini associated driver in that car, no?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm pretty sure on that, but don't quote me. So we've got Steve Smith, Reinhold Ringer, Sven Muller, and let's see who else. Harold Project. Yep, I'm going to go with that. Manthai Racing. What else do Manthai Racing run?
Well, they are the factory WEC squad that did not race.
Oh, okay, so you're saying this is a factory GT3 car.
This is factory in every sense of the word.
My assumption is this is a... what's that series they run in Germany that they only race at the Nürburgring? VLN. I'm guessing this is a VLN lineup. And it's a VLN team. It's that Manthai team and not the factory GTE team.
Yeah, and unfortunately, after Lee Keen left WeatherTech Racing last year, Sven Muller stepped in for that lineup as well in this series.
All right, so we've got number 57 of Lawson Ossenbach, Andrew Davis, Matt Bell, and Robin Liddell at Stevenson Motorsports Racing. They have an R8 still. So that's going to be a pretty good lineup. Stevenson also usually shows well at the Rolex 24.
Yeah, they've had some trouble with of course everybody knows Stevenson for the Camaro that they ran for quite a while, and even a couple of years ago in the Conti Challenge series. But these guys are definitely learning the new Audi this year. they had some struggles with the development last year through the car, but this is the power team right here. Aschenbach, Davis, Bell, Liddell, all in one car in the number 57. Normally we see them split between the number 6 and number 9 cars, but they're putting all their eggs in one basket for the Rolex 24. I think, especially with the Audis looking pretty strong through the roar, I think this is one entry to look out for the GT Daytona field. Yeah,
for sure. Let's see. We've got and the number 54 Core Autosport run Porsche 911 GT3. What team does Core Autosport run?
They also run the factory.
Oh, they run the factory Porsche team. That's right. Yes, of course they do. Just run in the other class. Just do it.
Once again, very strong lineup. So John Bennett, the team owner there at Core Autosport, of course, they were running in the PC category. Him and Colin Brown last year. Colin is he's gold at least, right?
Colin is gold. He's won, and if not won, come second or third in Prototype Challenge a gazillion times. He's a very good driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, Patrick Long being a factory driver. I don't think Nick Johnson is, but Nick Johnson is also very fast. We normally see him racing with Tracy Crone in LMP2.
Yeah, Nick Johnson, I believe, is a is a gold. And yeah, he's usually the much faster half of Tracy Crone's team. I don't see Tracy Crone on the entry list this year. Do we think he retired?
The only thing we can say is that we hope the green has retired.
Yeah, well, it was nice, when you had those years at Le Mans where it was like 9 Ferraris and 1 Porsche and 2 Corvettes. It was always nice to have the green, I think, because it was not another red Ferrari down at the AF Corsa Squadron headquarters.
I don't know, man. With that green, I probably would have been okay with another red Ferrari. But if my memory serves me correct, the Tracy Crone and Nick Johnson, and I don't know who else was in the car, but they were actually in an older last generation Audi R8 run by Flying Lizard last year in the Rolex 24.
That's
so that
right.
was just a one-off entry for them. In the bright green, the bright Crone racing.
Of course, it has to. I'm sure that's contractually required. So let's see. We've got number 51, Spirit of Race, Hublot Ferrari 488 GT3. I believe Spirit of Race is Italian for AF Corsa. That's just judging by their Hublot sponsorship, and I'm guessing on the car they also have a UPS logo somewhere. So that's usually who sponsors the AF Corsa cars.
They've got a Blancpain page, so I think they race in the Blancpain GT series, but Spirit of Race has also done some racing in the Asian Le Mans series this year.
Okay, so we've got Peter Mann, Maurizio Mediani, who's a pretty good Ferrari driver, Alessandro Pierguidi, and Davide Rigon. I believe Davide is the Ferrari driver of record there.
Very fine pronunciation, by the way.
I try really hard. I cringe when I hear Bob Varsha, and then I realize that I can't pronounce it any better. So there's always that. We've got the number 50 fan favorite with your boy Cooper McNeil, Gunnar Jeanette, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Thomas Yeager in the Riley Motorsports Mercedes AMG GT3. So we're going to gloss over that. Go Husky Liners. I think Husky Liner makes a great floor mat. You should definitely buy Husky Liners.
Small disclosure here. There is no way, shape, or form any affiliation between the Untitled Car Show and Slipstream Network.
Yes, this is very true. Very true. And my opinions are my own and not necessarily those of Right Foot Down or the Untitled Car Show. Anyway, Cooper McNeil is a decent driver. He's had some attitude issues in the past, perhaps we could say. Gunnar Jeanette has always been alongside Cooper McNeil most of the time. He's a very good driver. Shane Van Gisbergen, a excellent Australian V8 supercars driver who more and more recently has been able to come over and do some bigger endurance races. And Thomas Yeager, who doesn't appear to be from any country.
Oh, I got him as Dutch here. So
okay, well that makes sense. I had to find the link on the IMSA website, for me at least, was broken, so I had to find another sports car publications link, and I was very sad to be giving said publication a click. So There we go. Let's see. Number 48, Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, Bryce Miller, Andrea Caldarelli, yep, and Dion von Moltke in the Paul Miller Racing Lamborghini Huracan. I think that'll be a good car that'll show well.
Absolutely. Of course, Dion von Moltke has sort of reuniting with that team after the team left Audi and went to Lamborghini. His contract with Audi as a brand ambassador just expired, so he's actually got a lot of options for himself this year, and it's good to see von Moltke, Snow, and Miller all back in the car together. I think that's going to be really strong. And Sellers as well.
Yeah, Brian Sellers, always a good addition. I believe he was in the Falcon car with Wolf Hensler when that was still a thing.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely. So then another rando team here, Ebby Motors. Ever hear of them?
Nope. I'm going to go over under 4.5 hours completed. Do you take the over or the under?
These guys are, I think these guys are one of the ADAC GT Masters or VLN teams. So
okay. And Emmanuel Collard is good.
Slouch. Yeah, for sure.
So, fair enough. We've got the number 33 of Ben Keating, Jerome Bleekemolen, Mario Farnbacher, and Adam Christodoulou of the Riley Motorsports Team AMG, Mercedes AMG GT3. That used to be the Dodge Viper team, did it not?
Yes, it did, and they switched over this year to AMG, and I think it was a good fit. I mean, you talk about a huge fire-breathing monster. What are they going to choose this year? Well, another fire-breathing monster in the naturally aspirated V8 of the AMG GT3. And Ben Keating, owner and operator of one of the largest Viper dealers in the world, Viper Exchange down in Texas, I believe. He is a really cool guy. Another proper AM, but he's very fast, and he's willing to race just about anything. So much, in fact, that he's also going to be racing an LMPC car and a GT car in this year's Rolex 24. So he's going to have quite a bit of track time.
Excellent. Let's see, we've got the number 29, Connor DeFilippi, Christopher Mies, Jules Gounon, and Jeffrey Schmidt of the Monteplast by Land Motorsport Audi R8. Connor DeFilippi, I know, is a decent driver, and Christopher Mies appears in several endurance races in Europe. But other than that, I don't know very much about the team.
Another one of those foreign teams coming over, which, I mean, being a big event like this, we always like to see. I think these guys are probably also, just like all the other teams that we're not too familiar with coming over, very skilled drivers, team that definitely knows what they're doing. They're not just showing up to try this GT thing out, so we'll definitely have to keep our eyes on them as well.
We've got the number 28, Carlos de Quesada, Michael de Quesada, or Quesada, Daniel Morad, Jesse Lazaire, and Michael Christensen, the Porsche 911 GT3 driver there for the Allegra Motorsports 911. That team might show well as well. Mostly North American lineup.
GT3 Cup drivers.
Oh, are they? Okay, that would make sense. Let's see. We've got the number 27, Lawrence DeGeorge, Luca Persiani, Cedric Spirazzoli. That looks like the place that you buy nasty Italian food in the mall. Paolo Roberti and Rafael Gianmaria in the Dream Racing Motorsport Lamborghini Huracan GT3. Again, another interloper from Europe, I believe.
Yep. Moving on to the number 23, Alex Job Racing, Bill Sweedler, Townsend Bell, Frankie Montecalvo, and Pierre Caffer. This is, once again, Sweedler and Bell. These two guys are racing and everything together. They did a Lamborghini last year at the beginning of 2016, moving over to Alex Job Racing, I believe, for a full Tequila Patron North American Endurance Cup championship. And then Frankie Montecalvo we've seen all over the place as well. Very similar, I would say. I've always sort of mirrored his career with like something like a Tim Pappas. He's raced in the GTA fields over in Pirelli World Challenge, but also pretty fast. So, and then Pierre Caffer we're known to see in a Ferrari, which this year he'll be in an Audi.
So we've got the I think that's a car that's going to show well. That might be my pick for the GTD class.
Ooh.
So there we go. There's that. Number 23, Audi R8 LMS. Put your money on it. Go for it. See if we can cover the spread on that. We got the number 21, Marco Mappelli, Mark Bassang, Lucas Stoltz, Lance Wilsley, and Franz Conrad from Conrad Motorsport. Conrad Motorsport, a very successful European endurance team, so I wouldn't put them out of it at all. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Franz Conrad, the owner there, and Mark Bassang, who is, I believe, the Lamborghini factory driver.
Yeah, unfortunately not a whole lot here.
Yeah, not a whole lot there. I do know they're a good team. They pop up everywhere. They're at the Spa 24, they're at the VLN, they're all over the place. So they can't be that terrible.
Moving on with the Lamborghinis, which there end up being like 13 of them in the GT Daytona field. Oh man, I should have let you pronounce these guys. Emmanuel Anassis, Zach Clayman, and Anthony Massari for DAC Motorsports. I'm not too familiar with this team. Anything off the top of your head there, Ryan?
No. They are running a Huracan, though, which can't be that bad. All right, we've got the number 16 of... Oh, see, I've set myself up here. This will be good. I'll get to do my bit. Just looking ahead. Corey Lewis, Geert Jerome Moll, Kaz Gralla, and Brett Sandberg for Change Racing. I believe they were one of the teams last year that cheated. Can we call it cheating?
Okay, it wasn't a team thing. I think it was a manufacturer thing.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough. All right. They're sponsored by Xbox and Forza, Monster Energy, and Pertamina. So they're rolling in all kinds of money over there.
Right, but we're not sponsored by them, so don't worry about playing or drinking or purchasing any lights anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, it's, whatever. Meh. The big sponsorship thing right now, we have no sponsors, so I feel comfortable saying all kinds of names.
Oh, there you go.
But I do prefer Gran Turismo, so there's that. And I also prefer Red Bull. Or, if the time is right, I prefer Race Fuels, if it's available at a store near you. So there you go.
So moving on to 3GT Racing. This is the factory Lexus effort run by former RSR Racing Paul Gentilozzi, his team. So we've got the 14 and 15 here. Scott Pruitt, who is a quote-unquote, air quotes here, silver. He's racing with former IndyCar driver Sage Karam.
Sage, where's my T-shirt, Karam?
Exactly, yeah. Sage, He wears less shirts than my dog does, but then we've also got Ian James and Gustavo Menezes, and 4 very strong drivers here as well. And of course Scott Pruitt having some history in the IndyCar series as well, way back when. Hi to my family at home there. Moving on to the number 15, former IndyCar driver Jack Hawksworth. We've got Robert Alon, Austin Cindric, and Dominic Farnbacher in this car as well. It's going to be interesting to see if the Lexus is very fast, because we've seen some not the fastest times from this car, or the Acura for that matter. But I think, Ryan, they could be playing their cards just right and not showing everybody what they've got until race day.
See, I want to go with that, but again, my sort of anti-Sage side comes out, and I feel like Sage Karam would have messed up and put in a fast lap because that's who he is. I am not holding out a lot of hope for this team unless literally every car in the field ends up breaking down. That's a great driver lineup. It's probably one of the better driver lineups, but their car is, I think, a little bit too far back, unfortunately. And they've been working on trying to get that car to the grid for years. I think this time they finally said, whatever, come on in. And we've got a Paul Gentilozzi, who is famed for running... is that really good GT teams? Or GT teams that fold up shop very quickly because they haven't run the car correctly?
There's a lot to unpack there. But, I'll leave that to the listener's imagination.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. I had a point here. Oh yeah, fun fact: when we finally learned that they weren't racing in 2016, which they were supposed to debut at Detroit at first, I actually lucked into that story as well. So I broke that one as well. Only broken
Excellent.
2 stories in my life, and I'll take full pride in them.
Excellent. No, it's a good story to break. Lexus in not on the grid shock.
but it is cool that they are showing up with 2 cars.
That's good. It's I believe they are a registered manufacturer entrant, so they're giving money to the series, which is always nice. That keeps it running. Absolutely. So, and then the last car in the GT Daytona field, number 11, Christian Engelhardt, Rolf Inchen, Ezekiel Perez Companc, who used to run the. Oh no, I'm thinking of Luis, so I'm guessing that's his brother. And Mirko Bortolotti in the Crassa Racing Lamborghini Huracan. Luis Perez Companc used to run LMP2 cars over in Europe and was very good. So if this is of any relation, he is probably good as well.
We've also got a Pablo Perez Companc as well, so I'm assuming it just runs in the family.
Yeah, that's probably right. And then we've got Christian Engelhardt there as the anchor for the Lamborghini team. So we've got GT Le Mans. We're going to try to pick this up a little bit because what's said about GTLM, I think, has already been said. We'll start with the Porsche teams. We've got both the 911 and the 912. I don't like that. I don't like numbering your car as the number of the car.
It makes for writing race reports really horrible. The number 911, Porsche 911.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got Patrick Pilet, Dirk Werner, and Frederick Makowiecki in the Porsche GT 911 RSR. This is the new car where they've switched where the engine is because they've decided that the balance wasn't quite right. It's been a long time coming for that change, I think, and a lot of people had them as switching to the Porsche Cayman rather than using the 911, but I guess they have changed it. I'm still waiting for that mid-engined Porsche 911 to come out, though. As we know, this is GTLM. It's a production-based class, so...
Well, of course, now we're hearing rumors of a 4-liter flat 6 going into the Cayman soon, too, so...
Oh, well, there you go. All right.
It's getting more complicated.
So we've got the 912 with Kevin Estre, Lawrence Vanthor, and Richard Leitz. Both of those cars stacked with driving talent, frankly.
Yeah, no mention of Earl Bomber, who actually, him and Makowiecki have had a little bit of a history with some driving issues here the past year or so. We can't forget the Porsche dumping the Corvette at Long Beach, which I believe was Makowiecki. And then we also had an issue with a Porsche dumping, that might have been Pierre Caffer in the Ferrari last year. Or no, Tony Vilander at VIR.
There we go. Who was conspicuous? Oh, no, he's in the Pro car. Okay, got it.
Moving on, so that's the Porsche team. Now we've got the 4 Ford teams. I'll take half, Ryan. I'll give you the other half. The number 68 and 69. In the 68, we've got Stefan Mook, Olivier Pla, and Billy Johnson. In the 69, we've got Harry Tinknell, Andy Prio, and Tony Kanaan.
Stacked team, as always. Stefan Muka, who was one of the aces for Aston Martin. Ollie Pla, who did a lot of really good LMP2 driving, and then Billy Johnson, who I believe was with Stephenson for a while, no?
He did just move up from the Multimatic Ford Mustang in the Continental Tire Series. I think he was there for a couple of years. Before that, I cannot tell you.
Gotcha. Harry Tinknell, of course, famously managed by multiple Le Mans winner. Of course, now his name is gone. All right. Short Scottish man. Who drove for Audi. What is his name? That's going to drive me crazy. Alan McNish. Jeez, okay. So, Harry Tinknell, managed by Alan McNish. Andy Prio, former World Touring Car Championship, multiple time. Drove in the DTM, didn't really like it very much. Also, did some GTE racing back in the M3 days, and I don't think he ever got a good run at Le Mans. The car broke down or lost a wheel. He was when they had that art car that was all of the varied colors being shot down the side of it. It was the black M3. I believe he was driving that car the year it was at Le Mans, and he never got a good crack, so I'm glad he's back, albeit with a different manufacturer, to get a shot at that. And then some guy called Tony Kanaan, who's Tony Kanaan again?
The kid's got a real bright career ahead of him, I'll tell you that.
He does, absolutely.
No, I think he's really prepping himself to maybe be in this car for a little bit more than just a couple of races.
Yeah.
Races for Chip Ganassi in the IndyCar series, and I have a feeling that we may see him in this car a lot more, maybe next year or the year after.
For sure. And then I'll take the number 66 Ford Chip Ganassi Racing. This is kind of the domestic team, whereas the other team was Team UK that does the all over the world stuff. This is the team that stays in the United States. It's going to look very familiar, most of the cars at least. We've got Dirk Muller, Joey Hand, who were teammates at BMW for a very long time. Excellent driving pairing, combined with Sebastian Bourdais of kart, IndyCar, and LMP1 fame. Also did
Apparently he's from the USA as well, even though he's from Le Mans, France.
He's from Le Mans, France. I believe he has recently become a citizen here, though.
Oh, well, congrats to him.
Yeah. We've got Ryan Briscoe, Richard Westbrook, and Scott Dixon. That's a huge coup for Chip Ganassi Racing Ford. Richard Westbrook, usually a tried and true Chevy driver, and before that he was a Porsche Cup champion. So that's a good steal marketing-wise for Ford, I think.
Yeah, I think so. He was the last Chevrolet season he was with Visit Florida Racing and made his way over to Ford then when they were picking and choosing from the buffet of drivers that they got to choose from.
Yeah. And then, of course, Scott Dixon, Scott Dixon of IndyCar fame.
Yeah. Sometimes never mind, I'm not even going to go there. Look, he's sponsored by Cottonelle. Sometimes he's got to prove the cleanliness of that product, and he does go commando in the race car occasionally. This is a true fact. This is a very true fact.
My God. Isn't that against the rules? You have to have your fireproof underwear on.
Well, I think there's the fireproof undies, but I mean, those things are white.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. We've got the number 62 Risi Competizione of Giancarlo Fisichella. Don't know who he is. James Collado and Tony Villander. So that's a really solid lineup. I think Giancarlo Fisichella in the last couple years has finally gotten the hang of sports car racing and is now just unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. So him and Tony Villander have been really strong on that car in years past. So if they don't get dumped at VIR, that is. So. Yeah,
exactly. And James Collado, who's been kind of a recent addition to the Ferrari GTE driver ranks. He's coming along quite nicely as well after having come out of single-seaters. No Jimmy Bruni this year, though.
No, it's kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, he's getting quite old as well, though, so who knows?
Moving on to the BMW teams, the number 19 and 24. In the number 19, Bill Oberlin, Alexander Sims, Augusto Farfus, and Bruno Spengler. In the number 24, John Edwards, Martin Tomzik, Nicky Katzberg, and Kuno Widmer. So some more strong lineups here. This car, I think they continue to have some development issues throughout the season last year. I don't know if I think they finished everything all right, but I think we're going to see a lot more pace from the BMW guys this year.
I think if you're BMW, you've got to be really disappointed that back in the ALMS days, there was a couple years where they were untouchable, and the only thing that let them down were simple driving mistakes. But nowadays, and I think it serves them right for bringing over the wrong cars, but they can't catch a break just BOP and car-wise. I feel like they haven't run up front consistently like they were used to when they first began in the series. So I'm hoping for a bit of a turnaround from them this year.
And it's kind of interesting, too, because I think we're going to see come 2018, a new GTE car anyways. So this will be the last season we see the M6 in GTLM.
So there is something about the M6 GTLM car that I really quite like, and it's that you've seen the keep saying Bentley Continental GT3 car, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like the M6 for kind of the same reason, that it's just this big, imposing, massive car that's also really athletic and really fast and handles decently. I think that's awesome. If I had it my way, you'd have to use your executive two-door cruiser in GTE, but it's not my series to change. So, and then finally in the GTLM class, we have the number 3 and number 4 Corvette Racing Bright Yellow C7Rs. In the first car, we've got number 3, Antonio Garcia, Jan Magnussen, and Mike Rockenfeller joining the car, I believe, in place of Richard Westbrook, would usually fill that third seat. And then, of course, in the number 4, we have Oliver Gavin, Tommy Milner, former BMW driver, and somebody named Marcel Fassler.
Yeah, he was real hot at the Roar.
Yeah. He's real hot everywhere, I think. He's a quick driver, you know? And Mike Rockenfeller, I think, now does full-time DTM rather than doing the endurance stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, the number 4 caught on fire yet again. I think it was the exact same day to the exact same day to the year at the Roar this year as it did last year, and then they went on to win the 24 last year. So maybe they can repeat that.
You know, I think as the car burns, it gets lighter. So
I think so. And if it takes a little bit of a fire burn to get that win, I think everybody would choose that.
Well, as long as everybody's safe, of course.
Well, of course, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so, and then we've got the Prototype Challenge field, which, again, we'll try to bang through. We've got the car number 8, Ben Keating of Viper fame, Robert Wickens of Single Seater fame, Chris Cumming, John Falb, and Remo Rushidi. Yep, I'm going to go with that. At the Star Works Motorsport Orca FLM09, they're all going to be the same cars in this class. You can't count Star Works out, and that team is pretty good for a traditional Prototype Challenge team.
Absolutely. They're also pairing up with the number 88 car, the other Star Works Motorsport entry. Now, this car, I believe, from what I understand, the lineup is still way up in the air. So I'm going to read some names, and then I'm going to say somebody else who I know is in the car, and I think that it could still change beyond that. We've got Scott Mayer, James Dayson, Alex Popov, and Sebastian Saavedra. We're also going to see, Sean Rahal in this car, I know for a fact. I don't know. I guess that's another 5-driver lineup, which we see all over in this class, so that's no big deal. But the number 88 with the likes of Popov and Saavedra and Rahal, that's going to be another one to look for if they can keep this car clean.
Yeah. We've got the number 38, James French, Patricio O'Ward, Kyle Mason, and Nicholas Boulet for Performance Tech Motorsports. Don't know anything about James French. I've seen in the class before. I'm guessing he's the young, fast driver. Yes, he is.
Pato Award has some recent history in the Mazda Road to Indy open wheel racing, so he's going to be really fast as well. And I believe Kyle Mason also spent some time in open wheel racing. Do you know his background?
I do not.
So, like I said, this LMPC class does seem to do really well with that. Finishing up with the 2 Bar 1 Motorsports entries, the 20 and 26. In the 20, we've got Don Yount. I'm going to say Don Yount. I apologize. Buddy Rice, Mark Kwame, and Chapman Ducote, and Gustavo Yakimin. There's a lot to say there with that driver lineup. In the number 26, we got Tim Papadopoulos.
Tom Papadopoulos.
There you go. I always mess that one up. Johnny Molam, who fresh out of retirement, Adam Mirzan, Trent Hinman, and David Chang.
I think Johnny Molam saw what happened to Felipe Massa and tried to do the same thing. I think he thinks that if he retires again, he'll get given a car.
Maybe. Trent Hinman we've seen in the Continental Tire Challenge as well, so it's really cool to see him step up into the big leagues. And once again, another really strong lineup. Interesting on the 20, which I know is going full season. Buddy Rice of IndyCar fame. We've seen Kwame in the car before, and Yount as well. Of course, everybody's favorite Yak Attack, Gustavo Yakimin. He's back in the series, at least part-time. I don't think he's going to be in there for the full season, so that'll be really interesting to see.
Gustavo Yakimin, good for companies which stock spare parts for the Oreca FLM09.
We're going to see some fireworks this year.
Yes, that'll be excellent. And so finally we've arrived at the prototype class. We've got the number 2 Tequila Patron ESM car of Scott Sharp, Ryan DL, Pippo Durrani, and Brendan Hartley. And they also have the car. Where is theirs? They don't have matching numbers. So they're 2 and 22. Ed Brown, Johannes Van Overbeek, Bruno Senna, and Brendan Hartley again. So Brendan Hartley splitting the driver duties there. Scott Sharp has been with Ed Brown in the Tequila Patron class for a very long time. Ryan DL, excellent endurance driver. Pippo Durrani, He did a little bit of single-seater stuff, and then recently was the factory Ligier driver. I believe now he is full-time with Tequila Patron.
Well, they're kind of like the factory team now, too, because I know a lot of the crew are on-roke employees.
Gotcha. Well, that would make sense. And then we've got Ed Brown, of course, the owner of Tequila Patron, Johannes van Overbeek, unstoppable American racing car driver, and Bruno Senna, who is the cousin of someone famous, I guess.
And also spent plenty of time globally racing very fast LMP cars. So
He did.
They're looking really strong. You know what? I think Ed Brown is one of the coolest guys in the world. I interviewed him at Petite last year, I believe. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, this year we're not going to see a Pro-Am class for the top-tier prototype because of whatever reasons, LMPC is going away. You like racing in Pro-Am classes. You've been doing it in the WEC for quite a while now. Do you think they should have a Pro-Am class in the prototype category in the IMSA? And he said, dude, I just want to race. I don't care who it's against. And I thought that was really cool to hear from somebody who is, once again, a true AM. Of course, his business coming from Tequila Patron, but he's here to race, and he doesn't care who it's against.
And he's done himself a big favor by securing the services of Brendan Hartley for this race, I believe, as well. Brendan Hartley, of course, of Porsche LMP1 fame. He was also the test driver, I believe, for Mercedes at one point in F1.
So that does look to be like a really strong lineup. Moving on to the two Action Express cars, we've got the number 5 and 31, Joao Barbosa, Christian Fittipaldi, and Philippe Albuquerque in the Mustang sampling number 5 car. They won the championship in 14 and 15, and then the sister car, the number 31, Whelen Engineering Cadillac, driven by Dane Cameron, Eric Curran, Mike Conway, and Seb Morris. They won last year the championship. Seb Morris is coming in on the Sunoco Challenge from I think he's a British GT driver. I believe
he is a British GT driver.
So that's a great drive for him. And then of course we've seen Mike Conway in a couple of prototypes before.
Yeah, in addition to his IndyCar running.
Absolutely.
Let's see. We also have the Konica Minolta Cadillac. It's run by Wayne Taylor Racing. He has his two sons, Ricky Taylor and Jordan Taylor, in the car, along with their usual third driver, Max Angelelli, and then somebody called Jeff Gordon.
I think it's pronounced Gordon.
Gordon. And it's Jeff, Geoff.
Yeah,
Gordon. Anyway, he'll be making his, I believe it's his debut in endurance racing, and I think this is what we all hoped was going to happen when he said he was going to retire but not step away from racing.
He actually raced with the team in 2010, I believe, but it's only his second start in the Rolex. So, and here's the really interesting thing. They're going to need a third driver for the entire Endurance Cup, and Max Angelelli is retiring after the Rolex. So I'm wondering if Jeff would potentially like to drive that car more than just at Daytona this year.
I certainly hope so. I'd love to. Jeff Gordon, of course, I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but I did grow up in the era of Jeff Gordon being the man, being the kid from the West Coast, going over and showing all the Easterners how to conduct yourselves, frankly.
Really, so, and how to grow a really mean mustache at a young age.
Exactly. Mean mustache.
Moving on to one of the visiting teams, Rebellion Racing. They're going to be here for the entire Endurance Cup. Sebastian Buemi, Nick Heidfeld, Neil Yanni, and Stefan Sarazan. This is once again another really strong lineup. A bunch of guys here having LMP1 experience, including the team as well. They're going to be racing the Orca 07, which is highly based off the Orca 05. The Dragon Speed car, I don't remember off the top of my head, were fastest at the Roar. These guys are going to be very strong all season long.
They are, I believe that's an entire lineup. Stefan Sarazan might not have. 3 of those 4 drivers also have F1 experience for... I have to get in my Bob Varsha comment about F1 every time I possibly can. So that brings us down to the number 52 of Mike Gouache, Jose Gutierrez, R.C. Enerson, and Tom Kimber-Smith with PR1 Mathias and Motorsports. Tom Kimber-Smith, long been a hired pro driver for LMPC teams in the past. Mike Gouache, Jose Gutierrez, both known endurance drivers. And then R.C. Enerson, who comes over to us from Indy Lights.
He did. He spent some time in Indy Lights, but he also drove the final couple of road races for Daytona Racing in the IndyCar Series last year.
Gotcha.
So I think he's looking for, I don't know, a different experience here and maybe even long-term career security. Sports car racing is always good for that.
Indeed, it is. They're in the Ligier, correct?
Yes, they are in the Ligier. This is another one of those teams that we mentioned earlier. It's really cool to see the LMPC teams move up to the prototype category. They, along with JDC Miller Motorsports, did that. So, this is a team that it's been around a while. They know what they're doing. It will be a new experience for them being back up in this class. But once again, that's exactly what we want to see when it comes to the PC field going away for 2018, to see those guys bump up. The next two entries, though, Ryan, are my two favorite entries when it comes down to looking at the car. This was my favorite looking DPI platform, the Mazda RT24P, driven by Tristan Nunez, Jonathan Bomarito, and Spencer Piggott in the number 55, Tom Long, Joel Miller, James Hinchcliffe in the number 70. I don't know about you, but seeing Mazda come out with this beautiful prototype for this year, and seeing them, I don't want to say struggle, but the Mazda prototype has always been under development. That's their way of doing things. It's a true prototype in every sense of the word. Of course, we saw them with the diesel Sky Active for a while. They went to the gasoline-powered 2-liter turbo, I believe in 2015. They ran it last year, and then we're going to see the next evolution of that engine in this car this year. This is just a really cool team to see work, because they're always trying to figure out how to make that car faster, and it's going to be interesting to see them on the same playing field in terms of development as all these other prototype teams for 2017.
So I actually I attended the LA Auto Show this past season with Right Foot Down. I spoke with the team, and they are all very excited. And at that time, they told me about kind of how the BOP was starting to work out, and that's still kind of a little bit under wraps of how they were going to do it. But they were very excited, and they're very much looking forward to the car. They say it's going to be a little bit more stable in a straight line and a little bit less of a handful, because it's longer and thinner than the previous car. So it's going to be less of a handful in sort of tighter turns. It's going to be a little bit easier to control oh crap moments, etc. The whole team was there, and they were all very, very excited.
They also focused a lot on, the reliability of the mechanical structures of the mechanical structures of this car, because coming to the street courses, you're hitting curbs a lot, and so the DPs were a lot more reliable when it came to rough surfaces, and so they focused a lot on that aspect of the development of the car for this particular prototype as well.
If you look at the car, if you find a photograph of it, you'll see that the front splitter extends out probably 3 or 4 inches past the actual nose of the bodywork, and it's quite a large piece of carbon fiber. It's pretty wide. It probably fulfills to the letter the exact dimensions of the box that you're able to design in. And I asked about that.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I asked about that. I said, that sticks out quite far. Are you worried about it coming off? And I was giving a resounding no, I'm not worried about it. It's very, very, very sturdy. So I would look for cars this year to have tires cut down or chunks coming out of that splitter rather than losing the splitter.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the reason that's there is because we've got to remember these cars, the DPIs are built on the LMP2 platform. So that's a Multimatic Riley under there. That's the exact same splitter that the Visit Florida Racing team is going to be using as well.
Ah, I see. So in terms of the Visit Florida Racing team, we've got Mark Goossens, Ringer van de Zande, and Rene Arrast in the Multimatic Riley. Mark Goossens of SRT Viper fame, Ringer van de Zande, who ran open wheel in Europe for a long time and then became a pretty good hired gun for GT Challenge teams. And then, of course, Rene Rast, who I believe is a factory Audi driver.
And he hates Dion von Mocha.
Does he?
Yeah, absolutely.
I did not know
If you
that.
don't believe me, just watch the Magnus Racing Instagram feed and you'll find out.
Wow.
That's a joke.
Oh, okay. See, I've got no. See, I'm not in on the personal stuff. I watch very much from a distance. So
Yeah, no, same here. I mean, I just watching from afar. I've caught up on a couple of the jokes, but yeah, that's one to look out for sure. I will go ahead and take one of the final two here. Let's go with the JDC Miller Motorsports entry. These are this is another team that moved up from LMPC. Matthias Besch, Chris Miller, Steven Simpson, and Misha Goitberg in that car, the number 85 Orica 07, or ACA 07, excuse me. I talked to John Church last year when they were looking at what to do this year, and he was very, very mysterious in his answers to me. Yeah, we're looking at the prototype category. We may still run an LMPC car. I think a lot of this had to do with Misha Goitberg and Steven Simpson saying, hey, we do want to run in that new prototype category. And so they ponied up the funds to help make that happen, which is really cool to see. Steven Simpson also drives the JDC Miller BMW in the Continental Tire Series as well.
Gotcha. So that's a strong lineup then? Do you think that's a lineup capable of winning or no?
I mean, this is another one of those lineups to where you're dealing with a Pro-Am lineup with a Pro class. Do I think they're going to be fast enough to go for overall wins? Absolutely. I think they're going to be there all season long. But this is a different lineup that we are having. These guys are really going to be aiming for that Truman Award at the end of the year, which will send an AM driver to Le Mans. So keep your eyes on them, but once again, they're not Wayne Taylor Racing. They're not Action Express Racing. This is another one of those Pro-Am lineups.
And finally, the last car on the entry list, if you're still with us, the Dragon Speed Eureka of Heinrich Hedman, Nicolas Lapierre, Ben Hanley, and Loic Duval. Two drivers there who are no strangers to the 24-hour race in a prototype. I believe both of them having raced with Peugeot at one time. Actually, I believe they were both on the same team. I think they raced with Orica on when they were given the opportunity to use the Peugeot 908 for an entire season.
Yeah, I think this is also another one of those lineups that, are they going to be here for the entire Endurance Championship?
It might just be this one. I'm not certain, though.
So I don't have that information off the top of my head either, but well, so far it looks like only just one in the Orica 07. So I think that car, I mean, when you're looking at cars in terms of the actual chassis and engine, the Orica just looks so strong in the roar, and I think anybody who's in that car is going to have a really good shot of an overall win here at the Rolex.
Excellent. So that quite finishes the Rolex 24 Daytona entry list. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, we can all stop complaining about BOP because it's not going to change.
Excellent.
Excellent, yes. Do I think Ford is ponying up to potentially get another big win this year? They didn't sandbag as much during the Roar as they did during practice at Le Mans, but rest assured that
we don't know yet. Maybe they were sandbagging all of last season.
Maybe they were.
Maybe they have 9 more seconds.
They're looking for vengeance at Daytona, and they're also, I mean, that is a marketing effort in every sense of the word. So they're definitely going to be gunning for that as well. I'm just ready to see some new prototypes, man. I think that's the most exciting part for me.
I think having new prototypes is going to be a big, big plus for the series. And I think it sets off, like I said at the beginning, a pretty positive outlook for the rest of the series. And now we can go from sorting ourselves out to finally growing the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully there's more meetups at these races too.
I also hope for more meetups. Of course, you always need meetups. It's cool about, at least the races in Florida. It seems like they're just big parties.
Yeah, I mean, Sebring is like, yeah, that's a 2-week-long hangover afterwards is what that is.
Oh, that sounds excellent. See, I've never had the opportunity, because you go to the Long Beach Grand Prix, you can't just get plastered because you've got 2 hours to drive to get back to your hotel because you'll be stuck in traffic. And
but it's only a couple of blocks away.
True. And at Monterey, it's all old people. There's no young people go to the West Coast races apparently. So I'll be hosting meetups there, of course. But yeah, we'll see how well those are attended.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, if you're going to go for a race and to see the party, you need to go to Sebring. If you want to see a 24-hour race, you go to Daytona. My favorite track I've ever been to. Now, I haven't been to a lot of the West Coast tracks, though, but there's not a track on my bucket list that is already checked off that does not beat Road America, though. That is my favorite track in the world, and I doubt anything will ever top it. But I'm open-minded. But, yeah, I think we're going to have a great season in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship this year. And I don't know. I just look forward to seeing what the fans are going to be saying, what the forums, what the bantering complaints are going to be. I think we got a good year on us.
I also believe we have a good year. I want to thank you for coming on and helping me out with this. I really appreciate it. I hope that our listeners now have a little bit better understanding of the Rolex 24 at Daytona and what it's all about and who all's there, etc. Maybe you've picked out a car that you want to watch. Maybe you've decided you don't want to watch because you thought this was boring. But please at least watch the highlights. At least be invested. Check the live timing on your phone periodically throughout the day if you're working or whatever. Yeah. So, Dusty, is there anything? Where can the listener find you and your podcast and your social media presence?
My social media presence, I've been pushing out my Instagram because that's where I'm probably the most active. Dusty the Wind on Instagram. Of course, you can find out all my work at slipstreamnetwork.com and slipstreamnet on every bit of social media as well. We don't have a Tinder profile though, so don't look.
Oh, good, excellent.
Yeah, well, we don't. We had enough swipe lefts. We figured we'd delete it. Not a whole lot of people looking for that kind of action. But yeah, if you wanna follow along with our coverage as well, I don't have the room for all the scoops in my jeans that I wear, so you won't
see not enough scoops.
You won't find too many scoops there at Slipstream Network, but I do try to get the occasional story. And if I luck into it, if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's something there, I will write about it. So, but most of our stuff is the different podcasts that we do. And I did want to go ahead and say The Burnouts is our newest show. It's an automotive culture show that I mentioned at the top of the show. If you're into that kind of thing, if you're into the Untitled Car Show, I've been talking to Ike about this one as well, and he really likes what we're doing over there. So check that one out. But yeah, once again, I really appreciate being invited on the Untitled Car Show. This is my second time on, and I think what you guys are doing over there and at Right Foot Down is really cool. We're kind of at the same, I guess you can say, level of trying to climb these ranks because we really believe in what we're seeing, and I don't know, I think it's really cool.
I think I need to start telling Ike to quit being so pleasant. He keeps finding all of these people who have motorsport culture shows and then talks them up, and then their listeners go up and ours don't. So I really need to get on that, Yeah, gotta start laying down the hammer. Did you ever watch what was that called? Pimp My Ride?
I did a little bit, yes.
And there was the big black guy who officially he did wheels, but he kind of just wandered around the shop and shouted at people.
Well, there you go.
I need to become that guy of Right Foot Down, I suppose. But no, thank you very much for coming on. This has, of course, been a Right Foot Down production of the Untitled Car Show. Find me on Twitter at Ryanator122. And you can also interact with me mostly one-on-one if you Google search the Facebook search the Facebook group IMSA Fans. 2 words, IMSA, FANS. You can interact with me and lots of other very pleasant people on there. So please,
I think
come one, come all.
Rule.
Yeah, I did. I'm going to post this on the page and break another rule. So we'll see. We'll see how that works as well.
I apologize for any information I didn't already know because, I mean, come on. It's 10 o'clock. I just got done editing a bunch of shows, and I'm also kind of inebriated, so take it easy on me, please.
So, see, the thing is, with IMSA fans, they haven't listened this long. They haven't listened this far. There's no way they get to this part. So I can talk all kinds of crap about Chris and Scott and all those people.
Oh, God. You're setting fire to things, man.
Yeah, hey, I like to watch the world burn. What can I say? Anyway, so thank you very much for joining us. Tell your friends. That's the best thing you can do. We've got people asking, Ryan, how literally tens of people have asked me, how can I help support the show? Tell your friends and get us more downloads. Visit rightfootdown.com. The more listeners, the more variety of listeners we get, the cooler stuff we can do. So please, come one, come all, rightfootdown.com. Tell your friends the podcast, The Untitled Car Show. We do 2 a week. It's usually me about once a month, but I've kind of been trying to step it up. And then Ike does the rest as well. So wherever you are, have a good evening. Thank you. And have your pets spayed or neutered.